Hello, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for attending this amazing event, the King Effect. I am Deanna Collins. I am the program chair of NAMIC Atlanta, and we are going to start on time, 1:30, and we're going to discuss some amazing topics on this panel today. I'm going to shoot over to Deandra Hines, which is our VP of NAMIC Atlanta. And
thank you, Deanna. Welcome everyone. I am seeing people still joining. Welcome, I am Deandra Hines, Board Vice President of NAMIC Atlanta. For those of you new to NAMIC, we are the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity and Communications. We have 13 chapters around the US. NAMIC Atlanta is committed to engaging, connecting our members with the resources, people, companies, and opportunities that support and promote diversity at all levels and areas within the communications industry. It is my personal belief that the work we do at NAMIC transcends all industries. So happy President's Day, everyone. It's no coincidence that we have chosen this day for our King Effect event as we celebrate hope and change with the newly elected Joe Biden and our first female and first Black female Vice President, Kamala Harris. We celebrate change makers from our past, like the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who we'll be speaking of today, as well as those of our future. Diversity is a business imperative, so NAMIC Atlanta is proud to be a part of a change that must happen in our industry. Today, we will hear from dynamic leaders who are pushing the needle forward. One of those leaders is Marika Johnson. I have had the pleasure of working alongside Marika Johnson on the marketing committee for NAMIC Atlanta. Marika is the senior manager for diversity and inclusion at Cox Communications. In this role, she consults Cox's national and regional D&I councils, as well as seven employee resource groups. Marika partners with cross-functional leaders to produce impactful programming designed to attract, attain, and engage talent while driving business results. During her time in this role, Cox ERGs have increased membership by 70%. ERGs also have bolstered the company's pipeline of veteran talent. In 2020, the company was named a top company for diversity for the 15th consecutive year. That is amazing, and it reaffirms Cox's commitment to creating inclusive workplaces across the country. Thank you for joining us, Marika. We also have Mr. Kyle Stapleton. Kyle Stapleton, as he says, Atlanta influences everything, is a senior manager of culture and experience for Warner Media Studios, the creative production engine that supports Warner Media brands like TBS, TNT, HBO Max, Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, NBA TV, True TV, CNN, Bleacher Report, and so much more. There he fosters an environment that empowers top creative talent to shape culture through stories. This entails working across the employee lifecycle, from talent attraction and onboarding through engagement, inclusion, and development. His team's goal is to make Warner Media the world's preeminent destination for multimedia creatives. As a part of his interest in designing more soulful human work experiences, Kyle co-founded the Atlanta chapter of Culture Lab X, a global community of ex-professionals experimenting with the future of work. He also advises championed organizations working at the intersection of Atlanta's cultural impact and civil rights legacy, such as Atlanta Influences Everything, Generator, and Future Foundation. Kyle also co-hosts Tune Dig, a podcast about music discovery born from years of working with record stores. He earned his bachelor's and MBA from Georgia State University's Robinson College of Business. He and his wife, Carly, a visual artist and curator, are proud lifelong ATLians and also new parents. So congratulations, Kyle, and welcome, welcome. Last but not least, we have Miss Kimberly King, my dear friend and BET Forever family. Kimberly King, our moderator. She is a media and entertainment juggernaut. Kimberly's kaleidoscope of pathways in television, digital, music, and print have morphed into a career full of dynamic experiences, delivering compelling content as a writer, editor, copywriter, talent producer, creative strategist, and integrated marketer. Kimberly serves as the Vice President, One Platform Marketing, Creative Partnerships at NBC Universal. In her current role, she is a leader and collaborator on the portfolio team, creating authentic consumer connection for brand partners at the single point of contact for the vast portfolio of Comcast NBCU assets, delivering collaboration, innovation, and strategic storytelling to secure business results. Previously, Kimberly held position as Director of Integrated Ad Sales Marketing, Corporate Partnerships and Marketing at Discovery Inc., formerly Scripps Network, developing marketing programs to support advertisers leveraging the portfolio of 12 network brands, including TLC, Food Network, OWN, HGTV, and Discovery. Kimberly cut her teeth in the integrated marketing and BT in integrated marketing at BT Networks, a division of Viacom, where her passion for brand partnerships was ignited, creating and executing customized opportunities across broadcast, digital, and large-scale experimental platforms, including the BET Awards, Black Girls Rock, BET Hip Hop Awards, and Soul Train Awards. Kimberly holds a Master's of Science degree in integrated marketing and a professional certificate in digital media marketing from New York University. Kimberly sits on the Board of Trustees of Oliver Scholars, which prepares high achieving African American and Latino students for success at top independent schools and prestigious colleges. Also a proud graduate of Wesleyan University, Kimberly serves in a dual volunteer leadership capacity as the vice chair of Alumni Association Executive Committee and chair of Wesleyan's Alumni of Color Council. Kimberly is a native of New York and resides in the Bronx with her husband and son. Without further ado, I introduce you to this dynamic group of individuals, Kimberly, Marika, and Kyle.
Thanks so much, Deandra. Appreciate the introduction. Appreciate being here with you, Kyle, and with you, Marika. And to all of you who are taking time today to join us virtually to kind of hear a little bit about how these dynamic leaders are navigating their pathways for success. Just to level set, as we're coming into this conversation that's really anchored around the man we know and love as Martin Luther King Jr., I thought it would be great to just give a little bit of history on who he was and what he was able to accomplish in his 39 years of life, right? If you think about it, within an 11-year period between 1957 and 1968, he spoke it over 2,500 times, whether there was an appearance for injustice, for protest, or for action. He wrote 5 books as well as numerous articles. He led a massive protest, you might have heard about it, in Birmingham, Alabama. He planned drives in Alabama for the registration of African American voters. He directed the March on Washington and delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. He conferred with presidents, JFK, as well as campaigning for Lyndon B. Johnson. He was awarded 5 honorary degrees, one of which came from my alma mater, Wesleyan University, in 1964, where he gave the commencement address there. He was also arrested 25 times and assaulted at least 4 times, but still he persevered. He was named Man of the Year by Time magazine in 1963. And at the age of 35, he was the youngest man to have received the Nobel Peace Prize. The King effect, as we know and are looking to experience and talk about it today, is anchored around all of what Dr. Martin Luther King was able to achieve and accomplish in such a short window, a short, and I'll call it a divine window. And the reason why I was intrigued and really excited to participate in this conversation was, for me, it anchored what I call and how I live my life, which is in servant leadership, paying it forward, taking all the things that I've done and propelling someone else forward. So really excited to dig in with you both, Marika and Kyle, and just unpack this a little bit more. So something Dr. Martin Luther King said is that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are we doing for others? So Deandra read your bios, you know, the abridged version, but I'm really interested to know, how did you first become interested in working in the diversity and inclusion space? Give us a little context, tell us a little story about how this all came to be for you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start, and you level set with Dr. King's legacy, and that was just so powerful. And you're speaking my language when you talk about servant leadership. So going back to that quote and how I try to live my life, I have always tried to use my skills to solve the biggest problem I could find. That to me is how you create value, wherever you are, wherever you sit. And so my background is actually in communications, and I've supported diversity initiatives at our sister company, Cox Media Group. And I started in the newsroom and then worked into corporate comms. And I was always the person who helped to bridge the gap and build connections. And in the role that I have right now, they reached out because they wanted someone to help tell the story of the business value of diversity and inclusion. So they needed a storyteller. They needed someone who could connect the dots. And that was appealing to me because I felt like that was an opportunity for me to help. And it's also something that, you know, with Dr. King's legacy, wherever we sit, we all can reinforce diversity and inclusion. And I have a lot of people who reach out to me and say, I'm interested in doing D&I. And my first question to them is, tell me about the role you have currently. And how can we look for opportunities for you to reinforce these values in your role? It could be recapping, you know, an employee resource group, professional development session, or just sharing articles about team building. You know, it's tapping into what your skills are, servant leadership, and then also building on Dr. King's legacy and the fact that it was a collective movement. It wasn't one person. We each have a role to play in the company where we work, as well as in the community.
Love that. We love that. So Kyle, your shirt says it all. I'm sure you believe in the collective movement forward. Tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in this space.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say it's an enormous honor to be part of this conversation and to be with two powerhouses like you. It's a huge privilege and I appreciate it. So as Deandra mentioned in my bio, I went to Georgia State, which was, I mean, college is college, but I had a really transformative experience being in the city of Atlanta. I was born and raised in the burbs and I've had a love affair with the city. I grew up a punk rock kid. I have been kind of notoriously anti-authority since I was a teenager. Just like didn't like rules, didn't like adults imposing rules for no reason, and have always had the huge privilege of being able to like buck some of those rules with minimal real lasting trouble. But I got to Georgia State and a couple of things happened. One, it's one of the most diverse institutions in not only the state or the country, but also the world. It's like 150 something countries represented. So you are exposed to people from all different walks of life, and you hear about these small experiences that people have had that are really different than your own, just things that you assumed about what it was like to grow up. And people have had totally different, totally foreign experiences to that, right? So just lots of like storytelling and meeting people, and your exposure effect happens in a place like Georgia State. I'm so thankful for that core part of the experience, because it really expanded my vocabulary and changed me forever. The other thing is that on campus, you walk by the birthplace and the place where Dr. King did his life's work. Like Ebenezer is casting a shadow on Georgia State's campus. And if you're there long enough, you start thinking about, and Georgia State does a great job of talking about the legacy of Dr. King and the idea of Atlanta as an incubator for beloved community and some of Dr. King's ideas. And they also teach you about the King that they don't teach you about when you're a kid, which is later King, radical King, where he talks about how all of these systems have converged to uphold white supremacy and capitalism and militarism around the world, and basically keep things to the radically bad status quo that are good for a handful and terrible for most people, right? So Dr. King spoke to the punk rock kid in me, and like quite frankly radicalized me when I was about 19 or 20, and it's just been a rocket trajectory ever since. So I've been a troublemaker in every job I've been in since then, and I'm trying really hard to get kicked out of corporate, and nobody's kicked me out yet. And I suspect there's a lot of privilege baked into that, but I'm gonna keep making noise and causing trouble until they won't let me.
I love that. I love that because you're a self-identified troublemaker. But what I also heard through you narrating that, Kyle, in your story, was that you're keenly aware of your own privilege, right? And I think that
I don't have a choice but to be, yeah.
But that's part of the dialogue that we're trying to unpack, right? Because so much of the work that has to be done is, to your point, dismantling that, is to self-identify where we have the privilege, the power, and the access in collaboration or in conjunction to those that do not. So appreciate you bringing that forward. And I think we want to pull that apart a little bit further. But what I will say to our audience is we thought that if we're going to have a conversation about Dr. King, we gave a little bit of history of who he is. We talked a little bit about who our panelists are and what inspired them. We also thought it was important to kind of level set the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion so that we all have a fair playing field as we continue to unpack this conversation. So I'll just read you a couple of definitions that I pulled up, and then we'll go a little bit further. So diversity is the presence of differences that may include race, gender, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, language, disability, age, religious commitment, or political perspective. Populations that have been and remain underrepresented among practitioners in the field and the marginalized in the broader society. Diversity. We like to think of diversity as being invited to the party. Equity is promoting justice, impartiality, and fairness within the procedures, processes, and distribution of resources by institutions or systems. Tackling equity requires an understanding of the root causes of outcome disparities within our society. We talked about this amongst ourselves as everyone can get to the party regardless of the transportation mode that they get there in. We're all coming to the party. And then inclusion. Inclusion is an outcome to ensure that those that are diverse actually feel or are welcomed. Inclusion outcomes are met when you, your institution, and your program are truly inviting to all. To the degree to which diverse individuals are able to participate fully in the decision-making processes and development of opportunities within an organization or group. So you've been invited to the party. Diversity. Everyone can get to the party regardless of the transportation mode that they're getting there. Equity. Inclusion. When you're at the party, you're going to be asked to dance. So you're here regardless of how you get there, but now we're coming out onto the dance floor. So Marika and Kyle, as you started to continue to shape, servant leadership and becoming those professional troublemakers, is there something that really anchored for you that first opportunity when you were kind of coming into the space? Like, was there a job? Was there something you were looking for? Was there a lens through which you were viewing your professional experiences that said, hey, I'm going to hook my train to this wagon, and become that servant leader, become that person that's pushing the envelope to raise the trouble and ask and unearth the questions that haven't been asked? What was, give us something along the lines of how that's come to be for you.
So for me, a big part of my role is working with our employee resource groups. And we launched ERGs to help us attract and retain groups that were underrepresented in our company. So we launched with women's ERGs because we had an overwhelmingly large percentage of male to females. And then we added others over time. The most recent is our Asian and Pacific Islander ERG. And what resonated for me in that space is creating a sense of community. When we talk about diversity, a lot of companies for a while have stressed, we need diversity, we need diversity, we need diversity. But you can have a team of people who are all different, ethnic diversity, gender parity, but if they don't feel included, if they don't feel encouraged to participate, then it doesn't matter. We've seen companies that have had bumps where things have come out that were racially insensitive, and people have said, well, why didn't someone catch that? Someone probably caught it, but they may not have felt comfortable that they had a voice in order to be able to raise the red flag. So we're really leaning into inclusion, and I'm glad to hear Kyle talk about privilege and talk about being part of the having a seat at the table. They need you there because we need the rabble rousers to help people get comfortable being uncomfortable. And a lot of times when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we hear very frequently that white men say, I don't see a seat for me at the table, or I look at these employee resource groups, I don't see one that I resonate with. Join a group you know the least about, because this is about creating connections. We all have to work together. Sometimes our workplaces, even virtually, are the most diverse spaces that you walk into. And in order to be successful in that space, you need to really take the time to build connections.
I love all of that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think connection is really interesting because I think with connection, it also takes vulnerability to that space, Marika. And in that ERG landscape, right, I'm almost thinking that there's an opportunity not only for the leaders, because ERGs, if I'm not mistaken, in most organizations, they are volunteer leadership roles that employees can play in terms of helping to fuel that. So yeah, that connection is imperative to connecting to that vulnerability, which we're already seeing with Kyle. Come on, Kyle, tell us your POV.
So I agree so much with what you said, Marika. I think, speaking as one cis white dude, part of the overwhelm is there's so much, it feels like there's so much to see and know and identify and recognize. And am I going to use the right words? And am I going to move in this space authentically to myself, but in a way that doesn't offend anybody else? And so part of me understands how that can feel like a minefield, but I think, knowing that I'd like to think of myself as still sort of a young man, but I know I have a lot of listening and learning to do always for the rest of my life, but definitely right now. What has helped me to this point is just like hearing my mom's voice in my head, just stick around good people and you'll be fine, right? And so that's always looked for me like looking for good leaders, whether they look like me or not. Oftentimes they don't. And making sure that they share my values and learning a lot from them, but also feeling safe in challenging them and in being challenged by them. Like the best moments of my whole career so far have come when I've been the most uncomfortable and when I've felt the most empowered to make others uncomfortable. And that's one of my favorite things about my job right now. I work for this incredible woman named Laura Dames, who is the youngest of 5 children in a big Italian family from Boston. And so everything's very clear cut all the time. And we get to have some really frank, uncomfortable conversations about not only the landscape of the world, but like where we sit in it. Like when the murder of George Floyd happened, we had some of the rawest conversations that I've ever had with a human being in my life. And we're just 2 people sitting on Zoom like this. And it's like, wow, this is my boss at work. And I know that's not going to be the situation for everybody, but my hope is that if somebody wants to move into this work, especially if they're a cishet white dude like me, that they'll be committed to finding other advocates and allies, like little other spies that are going to go blow things up from the inside wherever they are as well.
You guys are speaking my language. I'm loving that you talked about safe spaces. I'm loving that you both mentioned getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and being challenged, right? So if we think about 2020 being a hallmark year, I like to call it the literal tipping point, right? Between the pandemic, the racial reckoning, and our political climate, right? So navigating that landscape, I would say both personally and professionally, was no small feat for anyone. Having those uncomfortable conversations with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, it was no small notion. So if we go back to Dr. King's noting that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, have you all seen that shift within yourselves and within your organizations over the past year that's different than the seasons that you guys were talking about leading up to bringing you into working in this space? What's the past year been like for you guys? Kyle, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's been different, but it's been a long time coming. And I think one of the interesting things that I've seen is people feeling a sense of relief that they can talk about this kind of stuff at work. Finally, I feel like people at my job have said as much explicitly. Like, you know, it was HR culture, it was corporate culture. We didn't talk about this stuff. Politics and religion, you didn't talk about it at the dinner table, right? You talked about it with HR and you aired your grievances privately that way in rooms and safe spaces. And now we have, you know, our CEO talking about systemic police brutality like a month after he joined, right? So it feels like a whole new ballgame in that way. But similarly to what you said about Joe Biden getting elected after 4 just completely insane years, it's not a return to sanity. It's like not a time to take our collective breath. We have to work harder now than ever. You know, like we finally climbed out of the hole a little, but we got a long journey ahead of us. So now is not the time to lose momentum, it's the time to double down.
Yeah, Marika, is there a renewed sense of urgency on prioritizing DEI in your is there a shift happening on your side of the house?
There's a shift. I think it was always part of the conversation, as Kyle said, but 2020 put a lot in focus. And one of the things that we did that was both powerful and painful at the same time was that we paused and we gave every employee an opportunity to come and share. And we did these focus group listening sessions where we said, come and let's just talk. How are you feeling? Because I'm not okay. Are you okay? And let's talk through it. And you had everyone, you know, we had we have our enterprise, so the corporate company, our automotive, and our communications employees. We mixed everybody together, just come and talk. And what we learned from that was we may work together every day, we're friends, we, you know, chop it up, we have virtual lunches, but our walks are very different. We heard from mothers who talked about their teenage sons who were afraid to go outside. And how do you as a mother talk to that child and still do your work virtually and keep a smile and keep going? We heard from white parents who also were concerned, what do I say to my child? How can I be part of the change? How can I make sure people understand that what I saw was unacceptable? So that was a moment of reckoning. And we also, of course, had people who said, why is it taking so long? Or, you know, what is it about this moment that is making people stand up? And my response to that is, let's make sure that George Floyd's death is not in vain by putting both feet on the gas pedal and moving forward. So if you had a list of things that the company shoulda, woulda, could have been doing, pull that list out and let's move forward. So we have continued the conversation and we've added a lot more rigor to it. So we're leaning into inclusion and making sure people understand what that means and how you show up as a leader to build a team, and recognizing, you know, not everyone has the luxury on a lunch hour to spend it on lunch talking to a leader. They may be taking care of children or checking on their elderly parents, things like that. And it also has meant giving people a similar playbook of explaining what unconscious bias is. And we paused and had the executive levels of our organization do some intensive unconscious bias training. We had already done it on teams. And so we're continuing that, rolling out more training, and we're being much more purposeful, more intentional when we talk about diversifying the top levels of our organization, much more intentional in looking at our numbers and what we can do to set a path forward, and making sure that everybody knows that we're truly invested in this. Is, you know, employees know, customers know when it's just lip service. They know when it's performative. And you have to do the work. So people are watching, and I think that accountability will hopefully help keep this moving in the right direction.
I love that you talked about the senior leadership connection point, Marika, because I was wondering from you all, like, without senior leadership buy-in, can you really move some of this forward, right? Because I would like to think that, to what Carl said earlier, there was kind of the HR culture that was permeating what corporate culture existed as, right? Then there was this tipping point, and I felt like we're hearing from the people who might not be the senior, but now we're at this meeting in the middle. Have you guys both found that in your environments that there is just that meeting in the middle? The leaders are now more sensitized and intentional, dare I say accountable, for what is happening and transpiring as the culture of corporate is shifting? Are you guys feeling that? Are you feeling like a meeting in the middle, that everybody has a voice? You might not have a seat at the table, but you at least have a voice.
I think at the high levels of the organization, absolutely, they understand and they see it more clearly after 2020, because customers voted. Customers said, I don't believe you, you know, and we saw a lot of people who would put Black Lives Matter logos on their Instagram accounts, and employees would say, that's not my experience here. So they were getting called out on that. And customers saying, I don't see it any other time than right now. So there's a greater level of accountability and understanding that we need to build authentic connections with our customers and our employees. For us, we heard from employees who said, we want to make this real, and we want to make this lasting. We want to focus on social justice, nonprofit organizations, and not just write a check, but find a way for employees to support those organizations. So I think it's been made real. Again, 2020, it truly put a lens on a renewed focus, and it is up to us to make sure that we continue moving in the right direction. But leaders see it. You know, they see in terms of employees asking for the high levels of the organization to have more diversity. And if they don't, they leave. Employees are saying, if I don't see myself represented, all things being equal with COVID, then I'm going to look elsewhere. So we have to do the work to keep top talent as well. And leaders understand that.
Are you feeling the same way, Kyle? Are you seeing that happen? Because a lot of what I heard in your bio and the culture and experience part of what your work is just that you're really ear to the ground to understand what leaders and employees are looking to achieve in that space. How does the culture come together? How has it come together for you, Kyle, on your side?
Once again, Marika is spot on. I think it's the King effect at work, right? Like no good movement of change anywhere in the world is going to come from anywhere other than organized, grassroots, bottom up type of behavior, vocalization, that sort of thing, right? Even the best leaders are only going to be incented to do like what they have to do. So I think we're at the step before the step. I think people have to continue to be organized and vocal about the things that they care about. We're seeing a ton of that every single quarter, every single full staff meeting. People are asking questions and they're being given a platform to do so, fairly enough. They're asking questions. What are we doing about XYZ? How much have we moved the needle on XYZ? Why isn't this moving fast enough? What's your position on this new thing that's happened since the last time you spoke out about this last thing that happened, right? So I'm really proud of our people, and I especially got to give a huge amount of credit to young people, to Gen Z. I'm so bullish on Gen Z as a whole generation. I can't say enough good things. Just they won't tolerate the timeline of the moderate, so to speak, and that's my favorite thing about them. And empowering a good, strong youth culture in an organization, I think, is one of the best things that an org can do. But I think what we're seeing, being in the storytelling industry, is that inside and outside have to match. Also, to Marika's point, right?
Yeah.
People want to see these stories that represent the full breadth and beauty of the world. And a Black story doesn't need to be a story about trauma, and Asian story doesn't need to be a model minority story, and LGBTQ stories don't need to be traumatic coming out stories, right? These are full, rich, multidimensional people that need to be centered in their own stories. So the complement to that is the people telling those stories and promoting those stories and financing those stories need to also have those lived experiences so that it's authentic all the way through and through. So what we're trying to do as an organization is align and empower in front of and behind the camera. And we have so much more work to do. But in 2018, we released one of the industry's first diversity and inclusion reports under the mandate of AT&T. And that's been kind of our guiding principle, is looking at 3 areas: our workforce, our content, and our community and or our pipeline, and like using the same vocabulary to say, okay, here's where we have to go from here. But whatever industry you're touching, whatever community that you're trying to reach, be a part of, that's the mandate now. And that's what it really means to be a stakeholder in a company, or a participant in the work that they do for the world.
And I have to echo what Kyle said about Gen Z. They were the fuel in the movement in 2020. And they not only expect, they demand for companies to show up authentically and take a stand on social justice issues, or they will move on. And that's in terms of, shopping and supporting that company and wanting to work for that company.
And as a music fan, I gotta show love for like where my love for Gen Z came from. I'm a huge Gucci Mane fan, and when Gucci got out of jail, he went on the Breakfast Club, and they were like, "Who are you most looking forward to collaborating with?" And he was like, "Whoever's hot right now, whoever's on the radio, whoever the kids like, that's who's great, and that's who I want to go after." And I was like, "That's not a bad way to live your life. That's a good way to stay relevant and see what's going on, especially in a thing like media and in diversity." If the world's changing, you look no further than to the young people who are right on the forefront of that change. And that's the same with Dr. King and John Lewis, right, and the student movement out of the AUC. Like, that's been true again and again in the history of the world. So there's a lesson to be learned there for me.
I think you're speaking that truth, both of you, right? Multidimensionalizing that storytelling and activism, really starting with the youth being active and leveraging their voice. And I think we haven't seen it to this degree, but I almost think, again, it's because of this moment in time, this unprecedented moment in time that gave gave us all a little bit of license, because I'm not a Gen Zer, if you couldn't tell, but it gave us all a little bit of license to really own our voice and own our power, and dare I say, own our authenticity, to show up in our very corporate spaces in affirmed ways. And I want to say to everyone in the audience, thank you for the wonderful comments. If you have any questions, we have about 15 more minutes. Please throw them in the chat. I'm monitoring it to see if we want to throw some in here as well. Based on all this that you guys have shared thus far, you both have shared thus far, is there any one particular initiative that you've led or been a part of that's really been like, you know what, this thing right here, more of this, and tell me why? Any one of you can go first.
Okay. When y'all shared this question ahead of time, I spent a lot of time thinking about it. And my first instincts were the sexy things, the feel-good things. We are a big backer of Reimagine ATL, who are working to diversify the storyteller pipeline in the city of Atlanta. We've worked with Ron Clark Academy, and my buddy Kirk Brown is a longtime Ron Clark Academy employee. And so seeing kids start to see what they can be and see that light bulb go, that's a fun moment that feels good. And I'd be inclined to say something like that, because you get the dopamine response. But really, it's exactly like marriage to me, like the unsexy everyday show up and take the trash out work of just being committed to renewing yourself every day again and again. So we instituted a progressive entry-level role pipeline for these crafts, like highly technical, highly creative, specialized paths, like editors, like 3D artists, like live audio engineers, where you got to have extensive training, you got to have good instincts, you got to build the trust and respect of a producer or creative director. Those are hard-won roles, right? And the cost of getting people into these roles is pretty high. But we knew that we were going to be screwed if we relied on the generation ago talent in Atlanta, because the industry just isn't what it was. It's changed so much in Atlanta and beyond. So we instituted trainees, apprentices, and associates building up into these roles. And so that's been 5 years or so, and it's been morphing and evolving over those 5 years, and we've made a lot of mistakes. And we've seen, I think, between 150 and 200 people come through the door in those roles and 50 or so seats. But now we're starting to see some of our early high potential candidates from unusual backgrounds. I'm thinking in particular, we met a young lady at an ABJ named Chloe Harrison, who we knew was dynamite from the time she was 21 years old, right? She just had something. And she's now one of our key sports editors. And it's taken a little bit of time, and it hasn't felt like progress, but then we look back on meeting Chloe, and now Chloe is one of the best sports editors we got in a highly white male dominated pocket of a highly male dominated industry, right? And she's crushing it, right? And now it's how do we go out and find 5 or 10 more Chloes, especially if they don't have the same demographics as Chloe, but kind of how do we replicate the parts of the Chloe story that are good? That's what the job is now, right? We take the 1.0 thing, adapt the good things, remove the bad things, and try to accelerate the trajectory of that. But that program has been a lot of work with a lot of rough edges, but we just kept at it, and it keeps getting a little bit better. And that's really what the work is. If somebody wants to jump into D&I work, generational systemic change takes a long time. It's not fun. It's hard. You take it home with you all the time. So if you're willing to live with all those things and you still want to do it, you're the right person to do the work.
I love that, because it kind of speaks to the fact that, to your point, my pastor always says change is not an event, change is a process. And when you think about what the process of the fruit that DEI bears, it's not quite HR, but it needs elements of HR, right? But it's leadership, right? So you're taking components of the culture, and you're really trying to find this happy medium. And to your point, 1.0, 2.0, and evolve it. I'm thinking, as you were talking, Kyle, about there's a marriage between understanding what traditional skills are and what, you know, those skills need to be to think beyond that, to unpack what that bias might actually be. Marika, I didn't know if you had anything to add on that.
Yes, for me, it's all about our employee resource groups. Those are employee-led organizations that are
volunteer, right?
Volunteer to attract and retain talent and build the business. And they are employee-led. It doesn't matter what your role is in the organization, in the company. It doesn't matter where you sit in the, you know, across the country. These groups come together and they have helped us get results. So they have helped us identify and bring in more LGBTQ suppliers. They host professional development sessions. We just had one on how to build your career equity. We're in the midst of Black History Month. So my background is actually the Black History Month team's background that we have shared for all employees to be part of this. You know, and they embody that. They live our values by creating a sense of community. And during a time when, you know, we're so disconnected from each other, that sense of community is really, it's powerful and it's necessary. And that is, you know, again, taking it away from the HR section and letting it be employees driving these conversations about how to really be diverse and inclusive. I see our ERGs as the perfect model for where that takes shape every day.
There's a question that came up in the chat from Malik Baraka, who said that he read an interesting comment in a forum that stated equality could feel like oppression to those with privilege. That's real full.
Soak that up for me.
Kyle,
Yes.
I saw you comment that you'd love to address it, so I'm going to direct it to you.
I'm going to speak as someone who has every addressable privilege known to humankind.
But you're an ally, Kyle. Clearly, you have distinguished yourself as an ally.
Sure. But I will speak as a privileged person. My perspective is if you have all these privileges and you feel oppressed, you're probably not that special. Like, period. If you have all of these opportunities and your first instinct is not to understand them, to seek first to understand by listening to all of these people who have faced these historical, multi-generational obstacles, and you still choose to say, well, what about me? I don't know. That's mediocrity to me. There's a great new book that I've just started reading and I would wholeheartedly endorse called Mediocre. I can't remember the author's name, but every cis white dude or every privileged person of any dimension, I think, should read that book. It's like, I've been fine my whole life. I've never had to worry about it. So
okay.
I'm going to weigh in on it as well, and I appreciate your perspective on it, Kyle. I can agree with that, and I would say to that, you know, anyone who looks at that as oppression, to flip it and think about it in terms of self-preservation.
Ooh, that's a word. That's a word.
That may resonate for that particular group. You know, you can't. I have a quote that I love. This is, you can't get different results doing things the same way. Every one of us is in an industry that is facing disruption. I started out in newspapers. How we newspaper today is very different from how we used to do it. And if you don't approach things differently, you know, they're worried about losing their seat at the table. You won't have a table. You won't have a business. This is about evolving in order to grow. And as Kyle said, you know, mediocrity, you're going to get left in the wake of those companies that learn how to adapt and evolve.
Love it.
Drop mic. So with the last few minutes, Dr. King said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. We talked about values in the beginning. We also talked a little bit about unconscious bias, particularly in the recruiting phase. I didn't realize there were so many levels to the unconscious bias spectrum. I'll just toss a few out for our listeners to kind of get a sense of it. And of course, language and sharing is power. Affinity bias, unconsciously preferring people who share the same qualities as you. Attribution bias, how you perceive your actions and those of others. Beauty bias, unconsciously noticing people's appearance and associating it with their personality. Conformity bias, that happens when your views are swayed too much by those of other people. Confirmation bias refers to how people primarily search for bits of evidence that back up their opinions rather than looking at the whole spectrum or the whole picture, what we'll call selective observation. The contrast effect can make you judge too harshly and set your standards too high, and that while you're looking for people who can fit the role, dare I say, I think culture fit, culture add might be the new language we want to use versus fit, because we don't all fit, okay, but we're very additive. And gender bias simply is a preference for one gender over the other. And then my favorite, or one of my favorites, is ageism. Those negative feelings that you have about another person based on their age. And we might have all even seen that at work if we've been at a company for a particular amount of years, and those elder statesmen who have all the historical, they get phased out. So in looking at this, how do we help reduce unconscious bias and really start to unpack, uncover, and bringing back our favorite word, accountability? How do we bring forth accountability in the workplace in some of those areas?
So I think it's getting comfortable being uncomfortable and beginning by acknowledging that we all have biases. We all have biases. It is human nature. That is the brain's shortcut to, solving a problem faster. So for us, the challenge is to check our biases and take the time to think before we act. That's very difficult, because when you're trying to fill a role, it's an important role on your team, and you've got things to do, you just need someone quickly. And it can be difficult to say, no, let's not go back to the same well we always go to, let's cast a wider net. If you want to tap someone for an important project, well, I know how Kim operates, let me just give it to Kim, instead of thinking about someone else on the team. So it's a shortcut, but we've got to build in the time to think about the long-term gains. And I think that's where the equality piece to the equation is taking a bigger role, especially coming out of 2020, and looking at the processes that we have in place that help us get those same results over and over. If we're recruiting and we always go to the same university, then you're going to get that same type of talent. And if you have biases, well, I don't know about that group, or I picked one person from that school and it was a bad experience, so you have totally ruled out that university. Those are the things that we have to check. And it means, as a company, as an organization, looking at all of those different places where that can play out, and doing the tough work. And some of it is also training people to understand when that happens, that you need to take a different route. And so it's not easy. And that's why we default to what's simple and what's comfortable. And a big piece to this journey is getting people to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You may make a mistake. You may hire someone and they'll say, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I took a chance and it didn't go well. It may take a little bit longer for that person to gel with the team, but you're going to get different perspectives at the table that may help you solve a problem faster. But I think we're just so attuned to having things now. Diverse teams can solve problems faster, but there is a ramp up time. And that is what can sometimes turn people off from doing the work and investing in going in a different direction.
I mean, turn people off is a gentle way of articulating it, I would say, because we know that we work for very huge conglomerates, dare I say. And so to Kyle's earlier point about the patience being needed to really navigate through these waters, it's exactly what we're talking about, right? The timing that it takes, leveling in at different touch points, really corralling and getting uncomfortable with those uncomfortable conversations, because not everyone, as we said, is going to be that culture fit, right? It's how do they become additive to the experience so that you can bring that wall down for those unconscious biases and make our workforce and our workplace reflective of the world that we live in, and really create, I would say, that intersectionality amongst all of it, right? Kyle, did you want to drop some gems in here as well, friend?
Marika touched in broad strokes on everything that I would want to say. And the only, I think, finer point would be, I've been reading this book by Lars Schmidt, who's a friend and a great LinkedIn follow. I think one of the great ways to have some of these conversations around things like unconscious bias is to follow a lot of great people on LinkedIn. And if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to share some of those great follows. But he talks about unconscious bias in this book as a micro solution to a macro problem. So if you just do unconscious bias training by itself, the evidence shows that it's going to have the reverse effect, right? There's going to be a backlash effect. So Marika is spot on in saying your processes are your fail safes, right? It's measure twice, cut once is the way we think of it, right? If you put in the work on the front end to codify your hiring processes, what you mean when you say they fit these values or whatever in an interview, how you assess them, how you pay people and give people opportunities, what transparency looks like agreeing on vocabulary is great, but you got to go a step further because people are human, they're fallible. Even at their very best, like Marika said, they're going to still have these biases. That doesn't mean they're inherently malignant or evil, but we have to correct for that through things like good processes, and especially through new tools like data. Like data, again, isn't the be all end all because there's bias within data because humans collect data and they choose to see what they want to see. But data points can help you have a more objective and candid and uncomfortable conversation and say, well, this is just what the data is telling us. The pipeline is not strong enough based on the timeline that we agreed to, et cetera. It helps take some of the air out of the emotional nature of some of these conversations. But it also takes really good leaders. So there's hard components and soft components to it. But to a point that we were making earlier, it rises and falls with good leaders. And if you are working under a leader that you think has the potential to be really good, take it upon yourself to challenge them and show them the way. Don't just say this sucks the way that we're doing it. It's not great. Like be part of the solution. Yeah, bring things to the table that say, I saw this out in the world. I saw this study. I saw this article. Be known as a person that's really excited about this stuff and as a student of the game. And if I've gotten anywhere in the space, it's just been through curiosity and challenging and just saying, well, what if we tried this? What if we did this? I saw this thing. So I hope that everybody, if you take one thing away from anything that I've said, it's been to just like go be that person in your organization or your community.
I think that's a wonderful way to end right on time. Marika, Kyle, I'm so thankful to be able to, become a part of this orbiting conversation. It's one that I think I'm going to need to, make sure that we continue offline. But if we think about exactly what the legacy and the King effect really is and what Martin Luther King Jr. committed to, it was the dismantling of racism. It was the pushing for change. It was the advocacy for justice. It was demonstrating commitment to advancing a more equitable society. He really galvanized the conscience of the nation and kind of helped us reorder our priorities. Little strange to think that we're still fighting for it, but like we said, change is not an event, it's a process. But his wisdom, his action, his words, his commitment, his dream for that new way of life are all intertwined in our American experience. And I would challenge all of us to consider ourselves, as Kyle and Marika suggested, part of the solution. Be that professional troublemaker, be that change agent that's hand raising, that's offering diversity of thought to elevate the conversation, no matter what your title says. right? You don't have to be the EVP, right? You can be the EA, right? And your voice matters. So I would absolutely encourage us all to continue to do that. And I want to thank everybody for joining today. And I'm going to turn this back over to Deandra Hines to take us through the next phase of this day.
Kimberly King, oh my gosh, can we all clap for our panel? Kimberly King, my sister friend, thank you so much. Thank you for moderating. I knew that you would be incredible. I knew Marika, you and Kyle, you all would be great. I've been touched by this conversation, and I know our members have as well. We've seen your praises in the comment section in the chat room, but beyond that, the work that you all do, the work that we all do, most certainly is changing the world, right? So thank you. Thank you. And it's not done. As art imitates life, I hope that you've gotten a chance to look at some of the beautiful pieces submitted to us by Comfy Art. And so I am going to pass this back to Deanna Collins, who is our programming chair, who most certainly helped in organizing this panel and brought in, all of these artists to imitate this life that we live in honoring Dr. Martin Luther King and in honoring Black History Month. And so if you haven't already gotten a chance to log on, the art link is in the chat, and we're going to hear from the artists about their inspiration for these pieces, and we'll see who won the bids. Deanna, are you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you so much. This was an amazing topic and discussion with you all. So thank you for being a part of this. Like Deandra has said, that we have an art auction. The link is on the chat, so you can browse and buy some art from these amazing local Atlanta artists. And we want to just have them tell us a little bit about what they have been doing and about the art that they have submitted for this amazing event. So the first person that I want to pull up is Zuri. Stand back, and he can introduce himself and tell us what his work is about, so you can get a little bit more about him.
Thanks, Deanna. Hi, everybody. Great panel discussion, by the way, guys. I worked with Marika at Cox for years, so I know what kind of work she's doing. And I'm an Atlanta native as well, so I've seen the city change. And I work in marketing and CSR. And so, helping people and fighting the need for further diversity in all sorts of areas has been kind of a lifelong work for me. I've been in technology, I've been in art. And so as an artist, what I like to try to express is a lot of the emotion of what African-American men feel, primarily because I'm an African-American male, so I can kind of identify with those emotions. And so the work that I collaborated with Comfy Art on that you'll see on the site is called A Piece of Power. And it's really two pieces that represent kind of the kind of duality of life, right? You want peace in your life, but you have to have a certain amount of power in order to maintain that peace. And there's always this balance between when do you exert yourself to really try to make a change, and when do you try to collaborate and give in and kind of settle in on a peaceful sort of solution. And so you'll see two designs that were done digitally. They're some of my favorite pieces ever, and they represent both the peace sign and the Black Power fist, which is how I like to reference it, although a lot of people will call it just a protest fist. And the colors represent the energy that comes from that, right? When you think about peace, you think about something that's a little bit lightweight. Your weight is off your shoulders. You think about light colors and kind of a soft feeling. And when you think about power, you think about exerting yourself with really bold colors and really sharp contrast. So that's what you'll find in those two pieces. And as a child of the 70s and 80s, Dr. King was a huge influence for me. So it just kind of flows through everything I do, just those lessons from him and all of the other icons of the 60s civil rights movement and beyond. So hopefully that resonates with you when you see the pieces.
Thank you so much, Zuri. And the next artist will be George.
Hello, everyone. Once again, I definitely agree with Zuri. It was an amazing discussion. So thank you so much for sharing, folks. My artwork is mainly urban landscapes. I attempt to document the past, the present, the future. Most certainly trying to show the way people live, their spaces. And with this, the images that are on the auction, they're mainly for my Bridges series. The idea that bridges most certainly were used to bring people together, most certainly bring communities together. However, we know that many of them are named after famous racists and also most certainly, unfortunately, have been used to hang Black bodies like those Southern trees. So, you know, I most certainly was trying to depict a certain amount of history, but also commemorating it a bit so people don't forget. Also living here in Atlanta, seen a lot of change. A lot of the renderings of places that I've represented are gone now. And yeah, I just want to make sure that we don't forget.
Thank you so much. We have two other artists. I don't see them on here, which is GW Hopper and then also Art Addict. She was on earlier today, but we just want to say thank you again for being a part of this. The link is still live for you to bid, and I'm going to take it back.
Deanna, can we see some of the artwork on the screen? That would be awesome. You guys can see what you're bidding on. One second, guys. We're about to share. Are we looking at GW's work, Deanna?
I don't know if you can hear Deanna, but you are the martyr pieces are from GW Harper, and then the dreamer pieces are from Art Addict.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as you share the screen, it kind of, messes up the sound quality. But Zuri, this is amazing. If you'd like to speak some more about your work that you submitted, we'd love to hear it as people log in to bid on some of this beautiful artwork. What is behind you? What is
Oh,
behind you
well,
right now?
actually, those two are the pieces. So those are actually up on the site for auction. So they're pretty
And then
big
there's
pieces.
one in the middle.
Yeah, and the one in the middle is something I'm working on now. So started to add a lot of color to my work. So I'll do a lot of portraits of men with different expressions. I can't even figure out how to dodge it.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll see on my website, I have like this is one of my paintings that I put on a t-shirt, but it's really just nonverbal expression, just a head, shoulder up sort of, look. And I grew up, my mother was a communications person. My father was in social work. And so speaking and learning how to interact with others, whether it was to nonverbal or verbal communication, interpreting it and, being able to use it effectively was always just something that was drilled into me. So I really like, faces and looking at expressions and trying to figure out what they're thinking, what their story is something I've focused in on the past couple of years. So.
How do you feel? Because the photo on your t-shirt is speaking to me. How do you feel about navigating corporate politics as a Black man? Because what I see in that photo is the weight that lies on your shoulders, and sometimes the burden is really heavy to bear. And I'm a big advocate on mental health because I feel like we've been through so much during these times. And too many of us, there's a stigma against just speaking to someone and getting the help that we need. And so I'd love to talk about what you think about that piece right there.
There's a lot there. So I've been navigating corporate America for 25 years now, 26 years. And I've been at places from IBM to startups to Cox with Marika at both the Cox companies. And it's interesting enough, it's something that I'm actually exploring now. Is growing up, it was kind of impressed upon me that I had a responsibility to do more than my parents did. And whatever you define more as is all about perspective, right? But if you're in the corporate world, more means more money, more titles, but it also means making sure others come behind you, right? That look like you, that speak like you, that think like you. And I was blessed to have people do that for me from very early on. From the moment I kind of was looking for a job that I couldn't find when my GPA from college wasn't high enough to get something good, right? So I had people take care of me, help me make it through. And so it's always been a feeling that I need to do the same for others. And it can be tough when you end up being at a company and you're the only one of yourself, whether that's Black, whether that's Asian, whether you are LGBTQ plus, whatever that is, right? If you're the only one, you kind of feel this responsibility to represent your folks.
Yeah.
And when you do it over and over again, and you find yourself trying to navigate the politics of corporate America, as well as the responsibilities of trying to represent your people well, it is tiring, and it does require an outlet. I mean, art was my outlet for a long time. It wasn't what I was doing full time. I started doing it because things got really heavy, right? So I was always doodling and sketching. I turned 30 and things were heavy and it was a struggle, and I started painting and it became my outlet. And as well as therapy. I mean, whatever it takes, whether that therapy is talking to someone, which I think is absolutely important, do it all the time, but also what are those things you do for yourself? How do you make sure you treat yourself, whether that's through some creative outlet, whether that's through reading, whether that's through hobbies, whether that's through family, travel, what have you? You have to take care of yourself because you can't bear all that weight for yourself. You can only help so many people. You can only do so much for yourself. So you have to just be intentional about it and looking after yourself when you feel the need to. So that's always been, for years and years, that's what I've always done. And I spend too many hours probably down here sometimes when things get really heavy. So.
You said a mouthful there. You definitely said a mouthful there, Zuri, and I completely agree. George, do you want to jump in on this convo?
I'd love to, but I did want to make sure that I was giving some space. I see Art Addict on here as well.
Is she on? Great.
Yeah, did you want to speak on that, Print? Because I'm excited to hear about that process.
Yeah.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been an amazing panel and opportunity, so I'm very thankful to be here. So you asked me, George, my process with this piece. And to be really honest with you, it was last year, MLK Day, before all this madness occurred. And I was going through my Instagram feed and everybody's posting pictures of MLK and everything was black and white and dreary. And I just remember as a kid, I've always been somebody who's really been, like I'm Puerto Rican, and I'm Afro-Latina, so I took a lot of time in doing my research on the Black Panthers and the Young Lords, and then also Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And so this has been my identity and something that I've been passionate about as an advocate for equality and justice for all since I was a kid. I've just been very rebellious and somebody that's always been trying to change what we thought was normal. I think at a young kid, I always knew that it wasn't normal. And I have parents who grew up in the projects in Spanish Harlem, in the Bronx. And so I grew up hearing these stories of, how they were treated differently and how they would leave trash, in the Bronx for days on end, and how the Young Lords came in, the Black Panthers came in, and they're the ones who started, giving like food and everything in schools, and also like making sure that people came and cleaned up those neighborhoods, regardless of them being quote unquote hood, right? So that's what I grew up with, is this information. So that day, I don't know why it was just last year that it hit me, but looking at all these images and knowing what MLK's legacy is and what he did, I just didn't think that these dark colors represented him. And I said, you know what? He was a dreamer. He brought so much life. I understand that the way that he, left us is sad, and it definitely like is a dark moment, but what he did for us as people is such a beautiful thing, and he gave us so much vibrancy. And so what I really wanted to do was bring vibrancy into his legacy, and that's exactly what I did. And I just changed up his image by really focusing on the dreamer part. I think that speech is just so important, and the passion behind that, I think as an artist, it goes beyond just what he spoke about. It also goes beyond you being an individual that is passionate about something so much so that you continue to do it regardless of who tells you that you can't, regardless of what you have to face to get there. I wanted to highlight that, and it was very important to me in this piece to highlight that in a vibrant, colorful way and bring that life to him and his legacy, showing like, man, this man, he brought colors together, literally. And so that's what I did in this piece.
That's amazing. I love it. It's vibrant, just like you, clearly. I love your outfit today.
Thank you.
I just want to let everyone know that a portion of the proceeds from today's art auction will go to the King Center. So please take a look, take a third look, take a fourth look. And we'll keep this art auction open longer than we anticipated, just to give you a chance to really dig through this beautiful art. Deanna, are you there? I think there was some issues with that. If the artists don't have anything else to add, then what we're going to do is close out and allow everyone to really enjoy the bidding process. George, did you have anything else to say, to contribute?
No, I'm in good shape. Once again, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm going to peruse this auction myself, maybe bid on something here in a moment.
Definitely, definitely. So I want to thank again, Kimberly King, Kyle, Marika. This was just, I'm full. I am full from the conversation. It's a great, great conversation. Thank you to everyone that has joined. I want to give a special thanks to our sister chapter, NAMIC New York, for helping us to cross-promote this event. It was a great event. And thank you all. NAMIC Atlanta looks forward to providing more meaningful programming throughout the year. Our next program will be for Women's History Month. We'll do a virtual award show. It's going to be incredible. Our president, Charles Neal, is doing something called Coffee Talk. If you looked on LinkedIn, you'll get in our website, you'll get to see the great coffee talks that he's done. He's done Jovita Moore. That is the recently released Coffee Talk. It's incredible. NAMIC Atlanta is here for you. If you're not already a member, please join and follow us on IG and Facebook at NAMIC Atlanta. Otherwise, you guys have an incredible rest of your day. Happy President's Day. I appreciate you all for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.